Hello, students. Hope you've been doing well in Math 1305, learning about sets, and probability, logic, and statistics. We move into a section of the class, even more practical than probability and statistics. I wanted to introduce a little bit of the format of the homework, how this is going to work. Some of the sections in Chapter 6, which is about money management, you see on the side here, still are very, very mathematical, and you're going to do them homework set like you've been doing. For example, understanding percent, simple interest. It's a very calculatable skill. But other sections in this chapter are a little more abstract and a little more personalized. For example, investments is going to be the first one. So as we enter week 14, homework for 6.7 is going to not look like a MyOpenMath module inside a Canvas, but it's going to look like a discussion board where students are going to think about investing money as financial, physical, spiritual, and the holistic act of investing money, what money management looks like in the future. Where students are going to learn about budgeting and saving and investing and planning for the future, but how money is a little bit more than just a number on a piece of paper, but about how Jesus has called all people in all walks of life not to store up treasures for yourself on earth, moths and vermin destroy, thieves can break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven. Classic 6 on the Sermon on the Mount. And so considering these words of Jesus and the holistic thing that is money investing, we're going to start thinking about how money management and investing, not just for personal gain, but could be for the good of others, could be for the good of your children, good of your community, church, family, how budgeting and saving can help you invest in others. If you had money to it, whether in a person, a ministry, a small business, how would faith influence? We're going to look at how, yes, investing is, like the book says, about bonds and stocks, return yield, and computing percent yield on every investment. I mean, as you work through the textbook, you'll see that. You'll see the practical side of investing. But then in the discussion board, I want to turn it a little bit. You can definitely still communicate with your peers and instructor about how that practical of investment looks. But I would encourage you to dig a little bit deeper and look what investment looks like on the spiritual side. Some investments that we make with money aren't necessarily turning on earth, or like Jesus said, store up for yourself treasures in heaven, and what those investments could look like as well. So the next 3 weeks are going to kind of be double lesson, or have two different elements of the same lesson. One of these, as you read through the textbook and work through the practice problems, is going to be very practical and very mathematical. And as you work into the discussion board with your peers, I'm still encouraging you to talk about the practical, talk about what you might invest in. But then I would highly encourage you to talk about the spiritual side of investing, what that looks like in you. So that's going to be what we're going to do on week 14, is we're going to talk about 6.7. We're going to discuss, they'll do on Sunday, investment. And we're going to talk about how to invest our money financially, spiritually, and physically in all sorts of things that go a little bit beyond just the stock market. Then as we roll into week 15, we're going to move into loans and credit, kind of look at what loans look like. So you're going to read through basics of loans and student loans and credit cards. And we're going to begin to think about loans and credit as also a spiritual decision, and how it affects how generous you can be, how it affects your daily life, how having credit hanging over your head, while I'm not always 100% discouraging it, can affect your generosity with other people. You cannot give away what you do not have. And in light of that, In order to be a generous person, your investment or decision making is exit college. And we're going to explore how loans and credit cards work in this chapter, 6.7, over the course of week 15. Easy to focus on interest rates, payment plans, and credit scores. But from a Christian, Christ-centered point of view, our financial choices reflect heart, our wisdom in decisions, our generosity in the way we distribute our money. Speak a lot about who we are as people. If we are generous with our money to an overwhelming extent, then our lives look like filled with generosity and gratitude. Place. And if you think about that classic example of Ebenezer Scrooge and the Christmas Carol, he was a wonderful investor. He was a wonderful saver. He was a wonderful creditor, and he had a lot of money. But when Christmas time rolls around, he finds himself alone and family living, we see that sometimes investments are a little bit more than just. So I would encourage you to think about, as you discuss this week, 15 will be next week for you watching this video now, about how loans and credit cards work, when it might be wise to use them, when it might be unwise, how debt can affect not only your current situation, but your future. And then lastly, in week 16, we're going to be talking about renting and buying cars. And so as you get out of college, or maybe you've already experienced this now, big choices to make, whether you should rent or buy a car, whether you should rent or buy a home. I've attached a lot of videos in the Canvas for you to watch of people exploring this way more in depth than I ever could. But I would encourage you to think about those big decisions as you make, and how they will affect you for the rest of your life. How buying a home is not a temporary decision, but a pretty long-term decision, and whether renting or buying is right for you, and then discussing that with your classmates. So that'll be in week 16 for the third financial discussion board, where you will talk about whether you should rent or buy a car or a home. The pros and the cons on each choice include cost, flexibility, long-term value, short-term necessity. But as a Christian, and introduce the faith element into this as the last discussion for finances, it's important to look through a lens of stewardship. As much as everything that I've been given to manage and steward, to kind of be the guardian over, and to do that well. So making decisions that are wise, effective, is really important in me being a good steward of them. On Luke 14:28, Jesus says, "Suppose one of you wants to build up a tower. Wouldn't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it?" So yes, he's talking about the spiritual condition of the heart, but Jesus offers this really financial frugal advice, saying, if you're going to buy a home, going to lease a car, why don't you first sit down and consider if you have enough money to complete it? So the verse reminds us that planning ahead, being wise with what we're given, is a good thing. A couple things to consider in this last discussion post is the flexibility that renting offers versus the value that purchasing offers, but how both decisions ought to be made carefully, thoughtfully, faithful management things you. So you can find those full prompts in the discussion board sections. Just a quick reminder, that's going to be week 14, 15, and 16. A new discussion board and replies to your fellow classmates for each one. You should have 200 words in your initial discussion board, which is not a lot, but it's enough to get you thinking about these topics. And then 3 required replies to your classmates with 100 words. So for each of these weeks, you should read through the section. So the section's going to be investments. The section's going to be kind of these 3 lumped together, where you talk about loans and credit. And then it's going to be buying and leasing a car, and renting and home ownership. So the 3 sections are kind of going to break down into investments, 6.7. And then we're going to look at loans and credit because it's all really related, 8 through 10 for the second discussion board. And then for week 16, that last discussion board, we're going to go 11 and 12, buying and renting, both a car and a home. As you do this, I expect your answers and replies to other people to be cordial and communicate well, and feel free to engage past the required word limit and past the required discussion limit as you have conversations with people and maybe see points of view different than your own. Maybe you're not a person of faith who reads somebody's discussion post as it comes from a place of faith or Christianity, and you're interested and curious in that and want to reach out to them and say, hey, why place such value on church generosity or local church support? Or maybe you're a person who's never experienced investing in the stock market and somebody has, and you want to respond to them and talk to them about their personal experience investing. Feel free to engage past the word limit or past the 3 required replies. Classmate. Hopefully this is a little bit of a break from the homework modules and a little bit of a refreshing type of homework. You could engage with your students and your peers and your teacher and your instructor, and that you could learn a little bit of money management that you'll be experiencing very soon after graduating, or very likely you're already experiencing. Thank you so much for watching this, and thank you for your continued work in this course. Best of luck.